At 1340 Pennsylvania Avenue stands a piece of Colorado history. The Molly Brown House stands as an enduring symbol of the Victorian era and the city of Denver.
The Molly Brown House Museum is a cultural institution where we provide tours to the public to learn history of Denver, kind of history of what was going on during that time period, and also to learn about Margaret Brown.
Margaret Tobin was born on July 18, 1867 in Hannibal, Missouri. Encouraged by stories of overnight wealth, Molly, along with her brother Daniel, moved to Leadville, Colorado in 1886. In June of that year, Molly met James Joseph Brown, and in September, they were married.
JJ was responsible for finding the Little Johnny mine, which was a gold mine in Leadville that was very, very prosperous.
I think that Margaret Brown herself was a really fascinating individual. Where she was an incredibly modern woman at a time when gender roles were very defined. She was involved in running for the United States Senate. She was involved in women's rights, children's rights, minors' rights. I think that her social activism is really something that defined her, and I think that that's what's most interesting in her life.
Margaret moved to Denver, and she kind of started to become interested in what was going on, you know, both socially and civically here in Denver. But she never seems to be accepted by the very top tier of Denver society, which is called the Sacred 36, and the gatekeeper of that was Mrs. Crawford Hill.
On the cold night of April 14, 1912, Molly set out to embark on an unforgettable voyage on the largest ship built by man, the Titanic. After colliding with an iceberg, the ship plummeted to the bottom of the Atlantic, extinguishing 1,600 lives.
In the Denver community and in the Colorado community, she was already fairly well known before Titanic happened. Titanic's sinking garnered so much national attention, and her position within that was such a prominent role that it just helped to pull more attention to what she had already done and the things that she had already stood for.
Upon Molly's death in 1932, the house had transformed into a gentleman's boarding house, then into a home for wayward girls. On December 11, 1970, the house was bought by Historic Denver Incorporated and was restored into a museum.
I think almost everything is interesting about the house just because there's so much history involved, the restoration process.
The way that they converted this museum back from being a boarding house and efficiency apartments back to what it was when the Browns lived here is really fascinating.
I think the house itself is very interesting in that it's kind of been in Denver's collective knowledge that it was always Molly Brown's house.
I think that the future is going to present a really interesting challenge in how do we continue to really relate Margaret Brown's story to the stories of the national level and the stories that happen worldwide in that history. And I think that it's going to be a challenge for us and a really exciting challenge to keep moving into that and see where we go. And actually during her lifetime she was known as the unsinkable Mrs. Brown. After she got off of the Carpathia, which was the ship that rescued them, newspaper reporters said, "Oh, Mrs. Brown, you made it." And she said, "Well, it's just typical Brown luck, we're unsinkable."